Hello, my name is Sarah De Levesque, and I'm the Director of Regenerative Food Systems Investments, an initiative working to facilitate education about investment in regenerative agriculture and food, as well as build relationships and networks that will further the development of this investment opportunity. Today, I am excited to be speaking with someone who has been integral in the development of the organic grain supply chain, who has a lot of lessons to share as the regenerative food system develops, and who has been increasingly vocal about the important connection between food production and human health. Eric Jackson is founder of Pipeline Foods and will be leading a panel discussion at our upcoming Regenerative Food Systems Investment Forum on September 14th through 17th. Welcome, Eric, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I would love to jump right into our first question. You've spent the past few years building Pipeline Foods. Tell us a little bit about how your career brought you to building supply chains for the organic grain sector.
Yeah, I've been asked this question a few times in the last couple of years, and I think there were three sort of seminal moments in the last 15 years of my career. The first was when I sort of left corporate America 13 years ago because I saw the incrementalism in the corporate agricultural system, and I really was tired of it. 1% here, 1% there. It was all about volume. It was not about quality, and I just felt like there had to be something better for me to plug into. Immediately after leaving the corporate world, I started a company that was part of the Chicago Climate Exchange, and so I was doing carbon sequestration projects with growers across the northern tier of the U.S. And I got a chance at that point to sit at a lot of farmer tables and learn a lot about the challenges that growers were facing. And that started to sprinkle my mind with these ideas about how the food system really wasn't rewarding growers for doing good work, and we were trying to develop these external mechanisms like carbon markets in replacement of that reward system, which should be embedded in the food system. Unfortunately, the carbon market thing did not take off. So but because of that work at my carbon company, I also learned a lot about how growers were challenged to keep track of what they were doing. So we started Conservice as a way to help growers manage their business. And it was during the Conservice years that I learned an awful lot about how hard it was, regardless of what prices were doing in the crop side, for growers to have sort of certainty into the future. Again, sort of linked to my prior comment about the food system not rewarding growers. It was apparent to me that the extractive nature of big ag companies in terms of selling inputs into the growers was really a barrier that was very hard for these guys to ever get out of that trap. It was, the big ag companies knew exactly where to price things. They extracted the last dollar they could out of the growers. And so that started my mind working on, okay, there's got to be systems out here. There's got to be a way to help growers break free from these two paradigms. One paradigm where the marketplace isn't rewarding them, and the other paradigm where their input side is also extracting from them. And really the organic space, quite frankly, is the only marketplace today where both of those paradigms are broken. The pricing is fair, and growers are able to make a good living, from the consumptive side, and they do not rely on the big ag companies from an input standpoint. They don't rely on their seed technology because non-GMO is one of the elements of organic, and they do not buy fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides from the big ag companies. So I thought the organic space, fit both of those needs, I guess, for myself personally to get plugged into. And then as I started exploring, I figured out that despite the growth in the industry over the last 2 decades, really, there had not been anybody come along and put real investment capital into the infrastructure to support, this growing business. And so that was the opportunity that Pipeline seized to become, a developer and an investor into the infrastructure that supports the growth of the organic and regenerative grain space.
Yeah. Wow, those are two big challenges that you took on as you looked to bring yourself into this space with pipeline
Yeah,
foods. So,
yeah.
very, very awesome work, and it's been fun. I mean, just briefly, what pipeline has grown quite dramatically, quite quickly. What does your footprint look like in that space right now?
Today we've bought a number of assets and we've bought a couple of companies. We've also done some dispositions because not everything fit, into our portfolio. So today we own about 10, no, we own 10 assets across North America from Saskatchewan through North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa. We also have partnered with a number of different either individuals or companies to provide handling and or processing services. So that adds another probably 10 locations to our portfolio. So we operate out of about 20 locations today, grain elevators and grain processing facilities. Half of those we own and half of those are contractual relationships. We've got a small operation in Argentina. We've got another North American sort of sub headquarters up in Winnipeg to run our Canadian operations. And today, more or less, we have about 120 employees headquartered in Minneapolis. And everybody except for the facility operations, obviously, are virtual in this COVID world, and that hasn't seemed to have caused any interruptions in our business opportunities. So it's
That's
been good.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. The processing sector is an especially, well, I like to say unsexy, but also a very necessary link in the pipeline from producer to consumer. And this has been especially apparent in the era of COVID. In your mind, what are the greatest opportunities for investment in processing and infrastructure right now?
Yeah, I mean, we've always talked about what a very centralized system in any industry, but in the food industry in particular, would look like if you took out one of those nodes. So obviously, the animal processing sector has been exposed during the COVID situation, but I would say in general, the specialty space, which organic and regenerative production fits into, is underserved on a regional and local level. And the reason that that's important is because the consumers also have an interest in regional and local production, but there's good job creation opportunities in processing, and we've really shut down most of the local and regional processing operations over the last 50 years intentionally, as we centralized these functions into massive factory type settings, across the country. So today, and I don't know, really what's needed is a new financial model. So if you back up even a step from what do we invest in, we also need to think differently, I think, about what investment means. But assuming that somebody solves that puzzle, which I have not, we definitely need more processing capability at the local and regional level for grains and oil seeds in particular. But I think it holds true across all foodstuffs. Animal processing at a local and regional level. Again, every city and town used to have a place where animals were processed and turned into food. That is not the case anymore. But that space is highly investable, in my opinion, particularly as we move in the regenerative space towards putting more animals back on the landscape. And then the co-packing business model, has ebbed and flowed over the years. Sometimes it seems like co-packing and co-manufacturing have had too much space, but now that we have so many developments in new food products, and those food products really only can come to scale in co-manufacturing facilities because the companies that develop those recipes and formulas can't afford to build a factory to make the stuff. I think that that's turned into another bottleneck that could be addressed by the investment community, is in contract manufacturing and contract processing. So local, regional hubs for processing grains, local and regional animal processing locations, and co-manufacturing locations for finished goods, I think, are probably the best opportunities.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities there, and thank you for outlining those so succinctly and clearly. It'll be really interesting to see as we progress both through the current pandemic and afterwards, how much attention we can bring to those and where the capital flows. So,
Well, and if you think about, I mean, I made the comment about the investment piece. if you think about a model where these types of operations are considered more of a public good, that might be the means to unlock the co-investment from, the typical private equity market, along with family offices, along with some government programs, along with philanthropic dollars. There's an opportunity for mashing all of that together if you think about these types of operations as a public good and not just a private wealth creation model.
Yeah, I like that reframing, and I think again that will resonate maybe a little bit more because of what we're going through now. So very interesting. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. You and I have spent some time in recent months, and I know you speak with a lot of people about this right now, but talking about the connection between the way our food is produced and our health. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you were learning about this connection and why it resonates so much with you?
Yeah, I feel like the focus has appropriately been on the connection between environmental outcomes and our food production system. That's sort of the most obvious piece because food is produced in nature. And so that connection is easy to draw. And there's been a lot of research done, and it's been sort of well documented at this point that agricultural management leads to various ecological outcomes, either good or bad. But if you think farther about, okay, if you have a healthy soil, the food that comes off of that soil is also more nutrient dense. That nutrient density is something that's been sort of ignored in our food production system over the last several decades as we've pushed harder and harder for volume at the expense of quality. And if you think about the natural consequence of producing a healthy ecosystem is healthy food, why aren't we focusing on that healthy food piece in terms of its effects on the population in general? And as I started researching this, obviously there's the consumer-driven side of the market, which is the largest side of any market. But the healthcare system, every day feeds millions and millions and millions of people, and for the most part, there's not even an organic or regenerative option in the healthcare food service sector. So, not even having that option to me is implausible. That needs to be the first fix. If I move beyond that and I say, okay, well, now we have that option. Now we're in a position to do the same type of research at the human side that we're doing back at the production side. And we can start tying together human outcomes with ecological outcomes, with farming practices. And that to me I think that's the holy grail that can really start making things happen faster. We can move this whole system faster if we bring agriculture and healthcare into the same room together. The microbiome in your gut is influenced by the microbiome in the soil. There's only scant real data that support that, but the data is pretty clear. So we need to put ourselves in a position to study that more and develop the thesis that goes all the way from the dirt to gut.
Good. And so I think research, you've already identified something that I think answers my next question, but being more research on the space and protection. But what else, if anything, do you think it will take for this connection to start influencing the way consumers choose their food?
Well, I mean, the other big pieces in the food world are corporates and other institutions. They too have food programs, and I think things get normalized through repetition. So if you have corporate food buying programs, and if you have institutional food buying programs that are also connecting those dots between the quality of the food and the quality of life, quite frankly, for the people that are consuming that food, ultimately you no matter where you turn, you're hearing and learning the same message. So having those institutions come alongside of this effort and not just buy good food, but talk about why the food is good, where the food came from, and focus on the human satisfaction of consuming that food. I think that it all becomes then part of the ether. If you don't have any of those conversations, which has been the case up until fairly recently, nobody's thinking about them. But if you're always having those conversations, then it becomes part of every sort of everyday life, which is ultimately where we're all trying to get this this regenerative movement to become, right? Um, the health benefits of not just what you don't eat. Sugar is the current evil, but the quality of the food beyond calories is really a very interesting area that needs more study. But again, the studies that have been done, I think, are quite conclusive in their own right.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the kind of points that stuck out to me when you were saying that, is this idea of repetition. You need to
Yep.
build these habits, but also this idea of just focusing on kind of institutional healthcare really brings about this idea of credibility too. If people see this as an option in our health system, our healthcare system, then it adds a little bit of credibility as to what this space is and what this kind of food is.
No, and we just had a recent example here in Minneapolis. I think it was in yesterday's or the day before, newspaper between Allina Health and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota that they have agreed to an outcomes-based compensation model. So now you've got a large insurer and a large healthcare provider agreeing that instead of following the traditional path of sick care, which I would argue is most of what our healthcare system is today, they're actually going to reward healthcare. So focusing on outcomes, not on practices, focusing on the human health aspect, not on the processes and procedures for the compensation model. That's an important step in this direction. So we do have folks that are starting to connect these dots. We're just trying to make it go farther faster. Is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can tell us anything about what Pipeline is doing right now, working on in that space uh, to further that.
Well, we've been pushing on this for a couple of years. I mean, a couple of years ago, it felt like I was trying to push a string uphill, and then a year ago, it felt like I at least had a stick in my hand, and I was starting to hit something solid on the other end. And coincidental or not, right around the time of the COVID situation materializing in March, I started to feel a slight tug on the end of that stick from the healthcare food service sector. So obviously, Pipeline, we don't deal directly in produce. We don't deal directly in animal proteins, and we needed to put together a group of folks across the spectrum so that we could, if we wanted to have an offering, an organic offering, for example, into healthcare food service, we could make a whole meal. So we are very actively involved. I spend a good part of my time rounding up the collection of companies and individuals that are going to participate in the first pilots of this. We hope to have this rolled out sometime around the first quarter of next year, and we've got, I think, all the pieces in place, at least on the demand side. We're still now we're scrambling to put it together on the supply side. But imagine a collection of companies and individuals who today are focused obviously on consumers, that they now have a brand new channel for their products, and in a system that is already set up and ready to receive their products. I'm really excited about this. So the role that we're playing right now is first of all, a convener of the conversation, and then second of all, an arranger of the supply chain into this new channel, which again is millions and millions of meals a day served through the healthcare food service, because it also touches senior care, it touches Meals on Wheels, it touches obviously in hospital, both for patients and for staff, and it goes into the community in ways that I didn't even understand how complex and broad it was until I started working on this. So a few extra million meals a day, pulling against the supply of regenerative and organic, I think is going to be really good for everybody.
Yeah, an enormous opportunity and very exciting. You're right. And I think that leads very nicely into my last question, which is, can you give us just a little teaser about the panel discussion that you will be leading at the Regenerative Food Systems Investment Forum on September 17th?
Yeah, well, as you and I have discussed, we're trying to figure out if there's an opportunity to experiment a little bit here and gather maybe some vignettes ahead of time. So we're talking to various people who can speak to aspects of the connection between healthy soil, healthy food, and healthy people. And then so assuming that we're successful in putting that piece of it together, we'll use that as sort of a backdrop to begin a dialogue with a couple of other people during the discussion, for the virtual conference. Dave Levesque from Croatan Institute and I are kind of co-conspirators on this. And I think that this whole conversation and this whole opportunity to put healthcare and agriculture in the same room, quite frankly, Sarah, I think it's the domain of RFSI to pull this together, and I think it can become, one of the more important dialogues in the years to come for this event, and perhaps for others that we dream up. Right. It's just something that hasn't been attended to right now. So we will have people from the healthcare side, we will have people from the commercial food side, we'll have people from the agriculture side, all throwing in their perspective, and then we'll try to tie it together. We only have a little bit less than an hour, so we'll try to tie this all together into a nice little bow that will at least send people away with the opportunity to think and continue the conversation offline.
That's great. And yes, we absolutely agree that this is a tremendously important conversation to have and to build on and make sure that we get it further and further out into the system and beyond the healthcare system as well.
Right,
so.
right.
And the finance community and investment.
The finance community, yeah. I mean, again, these financial models yet to be built. To me, that's an exciting thing, right? And so I hope that the investment community shows up with their thinking cap on, not just trying to figure out how to solve new problems with old ways, but figure out new ways to solve these problems, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we really need the investment community. We know the money's there. There's no question about whether the dollars exist. The question is, can people be creative enough to think about ways to collaborate across lines that have been drawn artificially, in my opinion, between pockets of money? Now, can we go horizontally across those pockets and figure out a new way to get things done?
Yeah. I love that. And I love that for our audience that'll be listening to this, because Eric Jackson has challenged you to put your caps on and get creative with this, because there's a huge opportunity here.
There really is, yeah.
Well, thank you, Eric. As always, this was really enlightening, and I am grateful for the work that you do and for the leadership you bring to this space. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and I appreciate your leadership as well.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
We will, and I will add, for those of you listening, that you can learn more about regenerative food systems investment and register to join Eric, me, and a bunch of other interesting people from across regenerative food, finance, and investing on September 14th through 17th at www.rfsi-forum.com, and we hope to see you there.